Guys, we're going to get started. Thank you all for coming to Helicon West. We love having you all here.
Yeah.
So let's get started. Helicon West is an uncensored public reading series. We host published authors and community writers to showcase all levels of skill and craft. We welcome open mic readers. We welcome donations to keep Helicon West going. You'll find a sign-up sheet for open mic and bookmarks with a QR code link for donations at the coffee station in the back corner there. Please help yourself to some Cafe Ibis decaf while you're signing up or donating. And please be sure to use a lid if you do get coffee to make sure and protect our nice carpet. Helicon West humbly acknowledges that we are here on the territory of the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation. We are grateful for our sponsors and partners, Sugar House Review, the Logan Library, the USU English Department, Cafe Ibis, and many community volunteers. For information, interviews, and more, please visit heliconwest.wordpress.com. We have a blog that's relatively active now. We, maybe once every week or so we get a post up, so there's definitely enough material to give you an hour or two of reading at this point. So tonight, we are once again blessed to have two featured readers, Emily Wheeler and Marianne Hales. First, we'll hear from Emily and then Marianne. Emily Wheeler is the author of over a dozen books of historical fiction, nonfiction, and fantasy, as well as numerous articles and short stories. She's won a Whitney Award for Young Adult Fantasy, Segula Journal's Creative Nonfiction Award, and was a League of Utah Writers Writer of the Year. She has graduate degrees in history and landscape architecture. In addition to writing, she sometimes consults about historic preservation and teaches history, and she loves gardening, folk music, reading, and exploring Utah with her husband and kids. Marianne Hales is a poet, essayist, and playwright living in Springville, Utah. She has been published in Dialogue, Segula, the Hong Kong Review, Helicon West, and Rocky Mountain Runners. Her plays have been produced across the U.S. and adapted for film. She is honored to influence writers at Brigham Young University and Western Governors University, and she co-founded Provo Poetry, a nonprofit dedicated to bringing poetry into the community at large in unusual ways, as well as Speak for Yourself, a creative writing open mic. So without further ado, we will hear from Emily Wheeler.
Thank you. I'm kind of short.
Feel free to adjust all that.
What's that?
Go ahead and adjust
Okay.
however you need.
Okay, I think that's probably it. Okay, so as you heard, I write across a few different genres, and I was going to try to read a sample of those. But as I was selecting pieces, I realized that I love talking about writing and history too much, and I could talk about them all night, and you guys don't want to listen to that all night, and mostly because we have another reader. So I decided to just focus on No Peace with the Dawn. This is a work of historical fiction, which you probably know, but that means that the events in it are real. The people are fictional. They kind of take pieces from different real people to make a fictional character to go through these real events. I wrote this book with Jeff Bateman. He and I were both in the history program together up at USU. We both ended up in the same writing group, the Writers Cache writing group together. And we talked about how interesting it would be to write about Cache Valley during World War I. And he's a military historian and I'm a social historian, so we realized that we felt like we would make a good team. I feel like we did justice to the story. And it was exciting to write about things that are all around us, that are impacting us today, even if we might not realize it. The tabernacle right over here was the site of the funeral for the first two men from Utah killed in World War I. They were band members, and they were actually killed in an accident, but they were buried right up there on in the cemetery next to USU. the Logan 10th Ward, which was the north part of, was at the time the north part of Logan, was called Little Berlin because it had so many German speakers. After World War I, most of them, or during World War I, most of them gave up their language to avoid the harassment and prejudice that came against people that spoke German once the U.S. started fighting against Germany. And the campus plays a big role in the story. We did a lot of research there in the journals and the newspapers of the time to find out what was going on, and it was a lot of interesting things were going on there. At the time, of course, it wasn't USU, it was the Utah Agricultural College, so it was called the AC. And it was war training grounds. If you look at those buildings, including the English building that are there around the quad, Old Main was there, but those other buildings weren't there until they built them to be barracks for soldiers during World War I because they used it as a training ground. And then Old Main became a hospital during the influenza outbreak for the many people that were affected by that. And so all those and a lot of other things that we found as we were researching are woven into the story. For the first section, I'm going to read just background that's helpful to know. Trudy is a character who is Swiss-German, so her home country is neutral, but because she is a German speaker and has an accent, she has faced harassment and prejudice at this point in the book. And then Alonzo is he's kind of outspoken about not thinking the U.S. should join the war. He has an agricultural deferment because he's a farmer, but people don't treat him kindly for that reason either. And then Alonzo's sister is Trudy's best friend, Clara, who has volunteered to go overseas, and the next section is about her, but she'll get mentioned in this, just so you know who the characters are at this point. The rattle of guns echoed over campus. Trudy clutched her books tighter, then forced herself to relax. The ROTC was holding a mock battle north of the school, just outside the cemetery. Trudy shivered at the thought. Had they chosen that place on purpose to remind the boys what was at stake? She made her way to the gym, where the girls' regular physical education class had been canceled indefinitely in favor of female military drills. Not with guns, of course. Trudy had seen the pictures of earlier generations of AC women drilling with their uniforms and rifles. That tradition had faded away, but now the school paper encouraged the girls to prepare to go with the Red Cross or to form a Legion of Death in America if the Germans invaded. Another volley of gunshots reverberated off the buildings, and Trudy flinched. Hopefully the need would never come. As she practiced marching in the gym with the other female students, she mulled over the rest of the paper's words. It reminded the girls that they would likely marry returned soldiers. If the war continued on much longer, America would sacrifice an entire generation to the trenches as European nations had. And drilling would teach the girls strict, silent obedience. The sentiment chilled Trudy. Not that she expected to be a rebellious wife, but there was something unsettling about the idea of becoming nothing but a silent, obedient shadow. Some days she already felt like her attempts to be a model citizen to fit in were erasing her. Still, she kept her shoulders back and marched, reaching for the energy to move precisely despite her exhaustion. Excellent work, Miss Kessler, their instructor called over the drum, setting the cadence. Everyone pay attention and try to follow her lead. Miss Kessler is perfectly in step. Trudy smiled, but her happiness at the compliment felt pale and watery. The idea that clung to her was that she was being prepared to be a soldier's wife, perfectly in step. Would the war last long enough for her to marry and send a husband off to war? Would he return hating the Germans, hating her native tongue? That could mean always hiding a part of herself, strict, silent obedience. She had little time to worry about it. Her time outside of class was engulfed with planning the Win the War Day celebrations on April 6th, the one-year anniversary of the U.S. entering the war. No matter how hard she worked, there were always stacks of projects vying for her attention. The campus buzzed over the news that the Army had chosen the AC to host a training detachment of draftees from outside the state who needed to learn more mechanical skills, more soldiers. Would there be any room left for the students? Main Street was so crowded for the Win the War Day parade, Trudy had to wiggle her way through mobs of people in hats and long coats to find a place to stand. Everyone in the valley seemed to be either in the parade or watching it. Trudy stood at attention during the flag ceremony and sang the national anthem with more enthusiasm than she felt. Volunteer spies for the American Protective League could be watching her, gauging her loyalty. Mobs across the country were attacking German soldiers who didn't act American enough, tarring and feathering them. The only way to avoid being suspected as a spy was to be more patriotic than any native citizen. She barely paid attention to the parade promoting war gardens and liberty bonds, though. All the activities had become a blur. Trudy! She turned. Alonzo waved as he made his way through the crowd. He looked stiff and uncomfortable in his khaki uniform, but his grin brightened his face when he caught up with her. She returned a weary smile. "How are you, Alonzo?" He shrugged. "Well enough. I had a letter from Clara. It looks like she sent it last month, but it just got here. I thought you'd like to see it." "Oh, thank you. Is it good news?" He held out the folded letter, his expression serious. Her mouth felt dry as she took it and scanned the lines. "She's driving ambulances. Isn't that dangerous?" He nodded. "Oh, Clara," Trudy said, handing the letter back. "She'll be all right, won't she?" "I hope so." He met her gaze. "And how are you?" "I'm holding up, doing my bit." That's what we're all supposed to say, but how are you really? Sometimes Trudy forgot how long Alonzo had known her and how observant he could be. She lowered her voice. "I'm feeling dispossessed." Alonzo didn't say anything, just looked curious. She went on. "There are soldiers everywhere. I know they're the same college boys who are usually here with their uniforms on." She paused and glanced at his khaki shirt. He nodded. "It's different when you put it on. They're not just clothes. You're wearing a new role, a new face. There's an authority that comes with it. Some people forget there's a responsibility, too." "You hate the uniform," Trudy said. He looked down. "No, I hate that I like the uniform. I hate that strangers look at me with more respect just for wearing it." "You don't think we should respect our soldiers?" "Of course I do. They're making terrible sacrifices, even if they don't realize it yet." He tugged at the pressed collar of his shirt. He trailed off with a frown and looked down. Trudy put a hand on his arm. "What is it?" He looked up, and the vulnerability in his eyes shocked Trudy. He cleared his throat. "I just wish people could respect me when I'm not wearing it, too." Trudy winced inwardly. Of course, he must know people were calling him a coward. People ostracized him, even at church. She wondered herself about his reluctance to fight. His agricultural deferment was legitimate, but he made no secret of the fact that he didn't want to go over there. He only went to drill practice because it was mandatory if he wanted to stay in school. "I'm sorry," was all Trudy could find to say. And then I'm going to jump ahead to Clara. She's volunteered to go over and she's now driving ambulances. Women who did this paid their way over there, and they paid for their ambulances once they got there. So they were paying for the opportunity to put themselves into danger and save people. It was an interesting situation, and especially for the women ambulance drivers, most of them were not working with the American military. Most of them were either with a British or a French ambulance company, or sometimes with the Red Cross. So in this case, Clara and her driving partner Lily are driving for the Red Cross. The thick tide of refugees flowed past Clara's ambulance like stormwater down an irrigation ditch. Somewhere, not far behind them, the Germans rolled forward with ruthless efficiency. Few young men trudged past. They stayed behind to fight or had already been captured or killed. Some of the women and old men carried guns, clutched like holy tokens to ward off the invading hordes. The fortunate ones had horse-drawn wagons loaded with their belongings, and others had smaller carts pulled by goats or dogs. A few pushed hand carts like the pioneers. Clara shook her head. The worst off had nothing except maybe a small sack with a few items rescued from the Germans. "If the Germans keep pushing forward at this rate, we'll have to evacuate the entire hospital in a couple of days," Clara said. "Haven't you heard?" one of the Red Cross girls asked. "Your U.S. Marines have brought them to a stop." "The Marines?" Reed's cocky smile flashed in Clara's mind. Reed is it might be obvious from context, but Reed is the guy that she's got a crush on who's joined the Marines. "Yes, in fact, they need ambulances at Belleau Wood. The casualties have been high." The blood drained from Clara's face. She dashed for her ambulance. "Clara?" Lily asked as she rushed past. "What are you doing?" "I know we're supposed to be moving refugees, but it's the Marines." "Reed." Lily nodded. "We'll go. You drive." "Thank you," Clara whispered. "We're in this together," Lily said with a smile. Clara blinked back tears as she climbed into the driver's seat and adjusted her goggles. She raced over the rutted roads, gritting her teeth against the jarring. She slowed as she passed the refugees. A few looked hopefully at the ambulance. She steeled herself and did not meet their eyes, maneuvering through them and onward toward Bellew Wood. She eased out into the fields trampled to bare dirt by the passage of troops. The ambulance rocked and dipped over the uneven ground, nothing like driving a horse and plow through the fields at home, more like trying to keep a boat steady on choppy waters. The thunder of the artillery rang in her ears. She tightened her grip on the metal steering wheel. She spotted a gaggle of nurses gathered around a dressing station and steered toward them. Some men were working to evacuate a dugout, but for now the dressing station was in a tent. Clara climbed down unsteadily, half expecting the ground to rock under her feet from the booms resounding through the trees. "Thank goodness you're here," one of the nurses called, hurrying to greet the girls. "Has the fighting been bad?" Clara asked in a low voice. The nurse nodded. "Entire companies wiped out. Most of the officers are dead." "What about," Clara choked on the words, "what about the 4th Marines?" "I don't know. They were all hit hard." Lily squeezed Clara's arm. Clara followed the nurse in a daze, everything around her muffled and far away. They walked past rows of dead and wounded men lined up on the field. Clara forced herself to examine each face. Many of the men were missing arms and legs. Some had parts of their jaws blown away, and they looked around with frightened, unfocused eyes. A few screamed or called for their mothers. Black clouds of flies buzzed around oozing wounds. Clara stopped, shut her eyes, took a long, slow breath, fighting waves of nausea. She gagged on the reek of blood and sweat-soaked wool and unwashed bodies. In the distance, the artillery boomed again and again, punctuated by the rattle of machine guns. The almost rhythmic pounding reminded Clara of the steady beat of the steam engine in the thresher on the farm. These men were caught in a giant machine, pounding incessantly, pounding out broken bodies instead of oats and straw. "Miss?" the nurse asked. Her voice was gentle. Clara slowly opened her eyes, met the girl's sympathetic gaze, and nodded once. "How many stretchers can you fit in your ambulance?" the girl asked. 3. "We'll bring you a few of the stretcher cases then." A line of orderlies carrying stretchers wound their way forward like mourners at a funeral parade. Clara moved automatically, aware that she too was part of the great machine of the war, just a gear in its workings. She and Lily opened the back doors of the ambulance as the solemn parade of men approached and offered up their gruesome cargo. 2 orderlies hefted an injured Marine into the ambulance. They'd thrown a blanket over him, but it caught and pulled back enough for Clara to see his bare leg, crossed with a line of bloody wounds like large, clumsy stitches. "Machine gun fire," one of the nurses whispered. "He may lose the leg, but he'll probably survive thanks to you girls in your ambulance." Clara took another deep breath and glanced at the young man's face. Not Reed. She sagged a little. Of course, if Reed was hurt, he might be in some other dressing station, waiting for some other ambulance driver. Please keep him safe. She wasn't sure if the prayer was directed at God or the other ambulance drivers. Maybe both. She pulled herself into the driver's seat and steered away from the battle. The ambulance bounced over the field, and the men in the back cried out from time to time. Clara winced at each bump. She alternated between driving faster, pushing to get back to the main roads quickly, and slowing down, hoping to ease the painful jolting as the men whimpered and groaned. Finally, they reached the field hospital. Clara watched the orderlies unload the men and then sat silently, her mind numb as she rested her forehead on the warm steering wheel. "Clara," Lily said quietly, "they had to go back. They had to do it again." Again and again, they shuttled mutilated men to the hospital, heard the boom of those terrible guns, and checked the faces of the injured. They only stopped when they ran low on fuel and had to turn back. Clara reported to the main office of the ambulance service as sunset painted the sky a bloody red. A British officer supervised the work. He shot her an appraising glance. "There's a dance tonight for the servicemen. Get changed and you can catch the truck going to Paris." "A dance?" She glanced down at her uniform splattered with dark stains. Reed and the other Marines were still out there in Bellew Wood, standing alone against the crushing force of the German army. If he was even alive. "You expect me to dance?" "Of course. What, do you have a bow? Don't worry. We're not trying to set up any romance, just keeping up the soldiers' morale. That's why you're here, after all." "Oh, is it?" she asked, her voice shaking a little. "Forgive me. I was under the impression I was here to help the wounded." "War is a terrible burden for these men. You're here to help them in any way you can." Clara squeezed her eyes shut, picturing the maimed men lying in fields. Then the hollow expressions of the refugees returned to haunt her, of the mothers and nurses trying to pretend for the children that their world wasn't crumbling behind them with every step. "War is a burden for everyone, sir. I am here to drive ambulances. I am tired. I have my countrymen's blood on my clothes. I'm going to my room to clean up, and then I'm going to sleep. If you want to entertain the men, you can put on the dress, sir." She turned on her heel and marched to her room, stripped off her uniform, scrubbed her face and hands until they were raw, then collapsed on her bed, too tired to cry. And then just one more from, with Clara again, farther into the war, closer to the end. The boom of artillery drowned out the grumble of the ambulance engine. The guns were American. Clara couldn't name all the weapons used by the troops, but each country's artillery sounded different. They had their own accents. Soon, the deep voices of the American guns were met by the reply of the German ones. This massive Allied offensive churned out hundreds of broken, shell-shocked men, but General Pershing seemed determined to overwhelm the Germans no matter the cost. "Do you hear them at night?" Lily called over the noise. "Hear what?" Clara asked. "The guns, the screams. Do you hear them at night when we're away from the front?" Clara nodded, keeping her eyes on the muddy track that passed for a road in the woods. The ground sloped away from them, giving glimpses over the forest. The fighting here was fresh. The trees hadn't been blown to splinters, though many had lost branches. Some had shell holes blasted through them like little windows onto the western front. Clara followed the chatter of gunfire toward the battle. The back lines had hardly even had time to set up here, but there was supposed to be a dressing station nearby. With the growing ranks of wounded soldiers, every available ambulance rode to the front, returning overcrowded from each trip. Last time, Clara and Lily had crammed 2 wounded men into the front seat with them. Bloody fingerprints still marked the dashboard. "What's that?" Lily grasped Clara's arm. Clara looked where she pointed. Something moved in the trees below the trail. It couldn't be an animal. There weren't any left alive. "Drive faster," Lily said. Clara hesitated. "What if it's someone who needs help? We have to stop." "If it's a German who's broken through, then we'll take him prisoner," Clara said, though they had little chance of doing so unless the man was badly wounded. She slowed the ambulance to a stop. Staying low, she followed Lily out the passenger side and watched from behind the vehicle's protective bulk. A soldier in an American uniform stumbled out of the trees. He collapsed, screaming, and clawed at his blood-stained shirt. Clara rushed forward and slid down the steep embankment beside the road. "Watch out for barbed wire," Lily shouted. The ground at the bottom was muddy, but Clara slogged forward. The man writhed on the ground, crying out incoherently. Clara gently grabbed his shoulder. "Where are you hurt?" Blood splattered his shirt and soaked the leg of his uniform, but the wound didn't look serious enough to cause such distress. Perhaps he had seen a friend die and lost his mind. "Gas," he hissed. "Someone stole my mask." Clara yanked her hand away and fumbled for her own mask. A smell clung to the man, something more than unwashed body and damp wool. "Mustard gas?" The man nodded, his bloodshot eyes wide with terror. She lifted her mask, then paused. The longer one was exposed to mustard gas, the greater the damage, and it lingered in low places like this ravine. The soldier had been crawling through it. She gritted her teeth and put the mask on him, despite his half-hearted refusal. "We have to move," Clara shouted. "Can you walk?" He groaned and pushed himself up and stumbled to his hands and knees in the mud. Clara couldn't leave him like this. They had to escape the silent toxin creeping through the woods. "Lily, get the stretcher and put on gloves. He's been gassed." She turned back to the soldier, stopping herself from touching his contaminated uniform again. If the gas had soaked into the fabric, it could be enough to poison her too. "Don't give up. Move. You have to get to higher ground." He whimpered but struggled to his hands and knees, crawling through the mud to the slope. He stopped and hung his head at the side of the steep incline. Lily was dragging the stretcher out of the ambulance. Every moment was killing the man, and possibly Clara too. She grimaced and caught his arm, tugging him up. "Clara, no!" Lily screamed. Clara counted the seconds of exposure. 1, 2, 3, 4. They reached the top of the embankment, and Clara dropped the man's arm, letting him sag onto the stretcher. Lily stared at Clara in horror. Clara held her hands out, resisting the urge to cover her face. She was contaminated. How long until the horrible blisters formed on her skin, until she was screaming in agony? "Let's get him in the ambulance," Clara said. "I can lift the other end of the stretcher." It wouldn't be long until she couldn't do anything at all. Best to be useful while she could. They gently slid the soldier into the ambulance. "You'll have to drive," Clara said, her voice leaden. Lily slammed the ambulance door and hurried to the driver's side. Clara trudged to the passenger side. She opened the door with her elbow and sat, keeping her hands carefully laced in her lap. A count of 4, plus touching the soldier's uniform and whatever gas was in the air at the bottom of the hill. How much damage had she done? She stared at her fingers for a moment. Normal. They looked normal. There was no sign that she was poisoned. Lily careened over the rough ground. Their patient cried out in protest, but Lily pressed her lips together and kept driving. When she reached the main road, she slid the ambulance into high and shot forward. Clara tasted the dust and the musty scent of the forest. For a moment, she imagined she was in Logan again, racing to the college. 2 years ago. The world wasn't the same place it had been 2 years ago. Not only did she know it better, but it had changed as she watched. Something of innocence dying in everyone around her as the machines of war pounded on. Lily raced straight to the field hospital. When she arrived, an orderly waved her to a stop. Clara nearly fell out of the cab. The orderly reached to help her, but she jerked away from his touch. "Mustard gas," she said. "The man in the back was hit hard. I touched him." The man nodded in understanding, pity flashing in his eyes. Clara bit her lip and refused to cry. The orderly called over help to get the gas man out of the ambulance. Clara felt like she was watching from a great distance. "Will he live?" "He might," the orderly said. "It depends on how much he inhaled. We'll know in a few days." Clara hadn't realized she'd spoken aloud. She glanced down at her hands and held them out in a gesture almost like a prayer. The man gave her a sympathetic look. "Come inside and we'll do what we can for you. You're not likely to die if you didn't inhale it." "I don't know for sure." "Did you smell it?" Clara nodded. "But just on his clothes, I think." When will I know?" "Soon," the man said. "We'll know everything." "In a few days," Clara said quietly. She looked down at her hands again. Red spots were forming on her fingers.
Thank you so much for that. That was fantastic. Lots of tension. We loved it. Okay, then up next we will have Marianne Hales. But before that, just so everyone is aware, we do have work from both featured readers being signed and sold at these tables. So please stick around after the open mic to purchase some of those. And now we'll hear from Marianne.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I don't know if, well, some of you do know, this is the grandmother open mic of my open mic. Two of your writers moved to St. George and started storing the mic. And then I moved from St. George to Utah County and started Speak for Yourself. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much. And we have right back there our favorite featured writer, Chad Van Zanten. Still, that was an awesome feature. I'm really glad for that. And now I'm also just dying to read your whole book because I was on the edge of my seat. So now we'll kind of change gears. We're going to come to modern times, but also in Logan, all over Utah. I'm going to read just parts of my opening essay in the book, and then I'll read a couple of pieces. So this collection of poems stems from a particularly blissful family practice where my kids and I go on a hike and spend half an hour to an hour at the summit eating lunch and writing poetry before ambling back down the trail. Eventually, the pile of poetry got high enough that it could no longer be ignored, but it simmered on the back burner because it never felt quite complete. At some point, a writer friend, and actually this was Chad, said to me, "You know, Marianne, there's such a thing as volume 2. Hiking became a family activity in southern Utah, where my grandparents had lived most of their lives. They took their family to all the beautiful spots, and my grandfather, a photographer, eventually started taking landscape photos, which my grandmother then painted. Apparently, they came to these hobbies in their retirement years, but to me, they had spent a lifetime doing it, and they did. It was just my lifetime, not theirs. When I think of my grandparents, they seem to fit better with a canyon background. My grandfather's olive drab and khaki in the same color wheel as the rusty browns and earthy reds. I had never heard of my grandfather submitting these photos anywhere for publication, though he loved to gather friends and family for a slideshow. He knew the canyon so well that he rarely labeled the slides, and after he died, they languished in boxes marked simply landscape, not scanned. Faced with the daunting task of sorting thousands and thousands of slides, my aunt had focused on scanning the ones containing people, leaving the canyons for whoever came next. I don't think my grandfather would have minded that. Despite leaving behind extensive photographic evidence, his connection with these wild places seemed more about being there than anything that came out of those road trips. Photographing the canyons was a way to bring the feeling of being there home with him. My roots sink deep here in Utah, with my great aunt, being the first baby born to the wave of white settlers that would flood the desert. I lived very comfortably, but bits of my DNA remember hot summers in mud dugouts and being hungry enough to eat sago lilies. When I am in these wild places, I imagine how my ancestors might have seen this land and wanted to find their own place in it, just like I do. I actually spent my childhood in Arizona, so I always thought it was weird when people called Utah a desert. My only reference points being along the green corridor in the center of the state. Later, I learned the distinction between high desert and low desert, and visited places that made the green of Utah's mountains look like a shade of brown. Desert has become less of a pejorative and more of a loving acknowledgement of the hardiness of everything living here. Any flourishing done here is hard won. This is seen most dramatically in a canyon full of scrappy scrub oaks, the wild strawberries that tumble down the hill along the water path, and pines growing directly out of a rock wall. Spend enough time with plants growing where it would seem more logical to shrivel, and you start to embrace the idea of the unconquerable soul. At one point, my youngest dressed exclusively in giant tutus, and we garnered a lot of attention, flouncing along the red dirt path as out of place and as in place as the bright red Indian paintbrush along a sun-beaten eastern Utah slope. Once a group of tourists who spoke little English asked to take a picture. I imagine they took it home as evidence of how frivolous Americans are. But whenever I think of walking a trail with a kid in a tutu, it strikes me as magical. Hiking brings me to a space in my body that I generally access when I'm meditating or writing. Writing these poems isn't a practice imposed upon the practice of hiking. They spring from the same impulse. Poetry is on the peaks, whether you write it down or not. Funnily enough, my grandfather was also a poet, and so were several of my pioneer ancestors. I only remember one poem my grandfather wrote, a love poem so tender that it shaped my whole vision of my grandparents and of love over a lifetime. So while I've never read a poem about Utah's national parks written by my grandfather, I assume he looked at them and photographed them with a poet's eye. At least that's how his photography looks to my poet's eye. The poems in this book are meant as a poetic trail guide, best read on the trail each poem was written on. In a pinch, though, you can look at the photos instead and let them pull you to the mountains, like my grandfathers did for me. So I'll read the title poem for this one. So it's Halfway to Heaven, and the title poem was the very first poem written, really, and it's called, in this iteration, it's called Zion National Park, Temple of Sinawaba. My grandfather spent a lifetime exploring and photographing these paths, driving his green truck up to Zion, over dirt roads to Bryce, Capitol Reef, Goblin Valley, and home again to Cedar Breaks. But I can't take a picture of what that looks like what I see. No matter the angle, the pictures are just of rocks, sky, water. Nothing stirs in me when I look in them. I am still caught in the swell of forgettable catastrophes, tight and hurried. Halfway up the endless black verticals of sheer rock, a pale reddish-brown alcove, tiny against the imposing cliff, watches over a one-stream waterfall haloed by fine mist. The crowd of tourists and everything else seem pushed to the other side of this completely insurmountable red rock wall. What is it about this place that unwinds the soul one vertebrae at a time? In the last months of his final illness, I would take my grandfather for scenic drives, passing the time during our long days alone together. Whenever I asked him where he wanted to go, he would say, "Keep driving till you see Red Rock." If he couldn't bring his tired heart home to his wife in heaven, he wanted to bring his tired heart home to the quiet places of his childhood. At 21, I saw only impracticality in his request. My childhood was in brown flat desert, not soul-healing red, so I didn't take him seriously. But now that I have found refuge in these walls, I wish I would have granted a dying man's last wish, driven 8 hours into the desert, sat at the base of the soaring rock, and accompanied him halfway on his journey to heaven. And of course, I have to read next one of my Cache Valley poems, and this is the Logan Canyon, the Wind Cave, if you've hiked that trail. Clinging to the one-lane trail with hiking boots and stick, loudly seizing each lungful of air, I envy the rooted trees that take in this view with the steady breath I have lost. I find it again in the hollow rock passage, more window than cave, and shuffle down the gravel slope as far as I dare, a few feet from a succulent, clinging to the farthest outcropping with shallow roots, cat's tail blossoms looking out to the canyon. I had scrambled to my best perch, and so had it. Eventually, we would both leave, my tenure much shorter than the hardier succulent, my position more tenuous, my pioneering spirit only surfacing intermittently. And this one, I'm going to read two in succession. They're both in Provo's Rock Canyon. But this is Provo Rock Canyon Trail asphalt, and then we'll read Provo Rock Canyon Trail dirt, because if you've hiked it, there are two very distinct sections. So, Provo Rock Canyon Trail asphalt. We are walking the trail by inches, identifying plants every few steps. This is a type of milk vetch, and this is a hybrid oak. This is a terrible place to stop. Not far from the scenic garbage can, a short walk from the scenic bathroom, a breathtaking span of historic asphalt as far as the eye can see. A ladybug crawls up and down single blades of grass, and it looks like she is flying, doing a grid search for her lost keys. A gray blue bird with a shawl of darker gray feathers hops further into the tree. Something adjacent chirps, and something behind buzzes. My botanist companion calculates the longitude and latitude of this common sagebrush, and I, happily, calculate nothing. And this is the Rock Canyon Trail dirt. They look like pallbearers carrying the barefoot man on a black stretcher, purple toes pointed down canyon, bare arms across bare chest. The only sign of life, the IV bag held over his head. 2 medics and 8 strong hikers who happened to be in earshot trudged by in silence as we pressed back into the trees. The only woman with a hand on the stretcher glanced over, and we exchanged grim looks of dim hope. Someone asked if the pain was bearable, and I thought he was talking to the injured man, but now I think it must have been to another pallbearer. How far must they have walked? How far must they walk still? And this one it's the Cedar Breaks National Monument. It's another one that references my grandfather. Cedar Breaks National Monument Amphitheater. Wooden fence, viewpoint to a Kodachrome slide writ large, my grandparents' eyes for my own. I am drawn here the way I imagine they were, by how the immensity wraps you up in God's creations. Man is nothing, which thing I never had supposed. I didn't know to ask when they were alive, but this is what my auntie tells me. I hope they don't tell me differently when I see them again, or I will have spent decades channeling their spirits for nothing. My thoroughly practical grandparents with a post-retirement penchant for the epic. Or maybe they just loved taking long drives. My grandfather couldn't stay in one place for long without a job to do. But if capturing the essence of this place was work enough to keep the truck in park, then maybe he would understand what I do, a worker in the kingdom who does more daydreaming than hem-stitching, who soaks up stillness and wrings it out into small puddles of insight, who might not be anything like the progeny they felt they were promised. Standing with their ground under my feet, I wonder if I am seeing what they saw, or if, like the wooden fence posts, This view and I are entirely new things that only echo the old. And I will end with this one. We have a little trail by our house, and so we have hiked that one a million times. We love it. It's in Whiting Canyon, and it sort of crisscrosses over a little creek, and it's very sweet, and it's a dog-friendly trail, so either we can bring our dog or we can love on other dogs, and so we quite love it. And we've been hiking there for over a decade. But we started when my kids were little. Aren't they so cute? And the dog was young. The dog is now an arthritic, mostly partly blind, partly deaf, only has 12 teeth left, old lady dog. But this is when she was young. So Whiting Canyon, Left Fork, first crossing. In the video, we are turning in amazement at nearly invisible joys, a swarm of butterflies we happened upon, a moment only captured in memory, unrecognizable in any picture. The spot, 7 minutes from the parking lot, isn't where we usually stop, but years ago, it was our destination, the place my 5-year-old refused to walk further. Enough of a retreat for me and my junior biologist, a babbling creek and log bridge that fit easily between school and dinner. The reluctant child, now a teen, is asleep in bed. So today we stop purely for nostalgia and sit as a little girl comes bouncing down the incline, hopping across the rocks, noticing every bug and falling into 2 inches of freezing water 4 or 5 times, always laughing, an echo of both of my children, who moves up the trail after 5 minutes and disappears into the trees, like the butterflies that foray into the sunshine and back. I have a few pictures of my littles here, a few lost poems, and a swarm of invisible joys, carrying our terrified border collie out of this puddle of a creek when she slipped off the low bridge, losing at leaf races, dividing a peanut butter sandwich and mandarin orange in 3 parts, catching ourselves on slick rocks, venturing almost too far off the trail, scrambling for the dog's leash, scrambling for little hands, never knowing the proper names for the trees. Thank you so much for having me. And you have to bring.
All right, let's give a hand to both of our featured readers. Thank you both so much. So now we come to the open mic section of the event. We'll have readers come up in 3s. I will place this sign-up sheet over here, so you have to come look at the books to use it.
Yeah, good strategy.
First 3 readers we have are David, Starr, and Edmund.
This is an epilogue for a sequel to my memoir. It was Renaissance Man from Glen Arbor. And so this is a new book. It's almost ready. The epilogue is called Sunflowers and Sunsets. As I sat on the patio behind my house watching the setting sun set the clouds ablaze in bright red-orange, I realized the sunflowers in the field below watched too. A slight breeze bobbed their heads about as if they tilted for a better view. The sun dipped below the horizon, but the flowers, sun worshippers, still followed it. I wondered, when will they turn their gaze back from west to east? What do they do in the dark night? Do they start turning in anticipation of the morning, or do they wait for the sun's rays as their alarm clock? If I shined a flashlight on them through the dark, would they turn toward me? If I had more patience, could I perceive their turning motion during the day? Sunflowers perform in regularity. Besides methodically following the sun when in bloom, the plants maintain a definite schedule of resurrecting. Only in the late summer of August do the yellow blossoms arrive on the scene. Until then, the flowers lie dormant, You don't even know they are there in the field, hiding in the wings, awaiting their turn. After the entree acts of the dandelions, the dyer's woad, the morning glory, and the other weeds I don't know by name, the sunflowers' sturdy green stalks take the stage, pushing upward to highlight their yellow stars in the spotlight. Their bright blossoms dominate the scenery, filling the field and acting like the main attraction. In some ways, I'm like the sunflowers. I wait to the sun warming the earth and streaming its light into my bedroom windows. While the sun orbits from east to west, I go through my day's schedule. Minutes and hours pass. Exercise, writing, errands, breakfast, lunch, and dinner occupy my time. I stay inside most of the day to avoid sunburn. Meanwhile, the sunflowers steadily track the sun in its celestial path. Late evening finds us both gazing at another sunset. The days, still pretty long, have been growing shorter since summer solstice. If I were climbing mountains, taking long monster hikes, like in my younger days, I would appreciate more daylight. Now, in retirement, I look forward to shorter days. Longer nights make sleep easier. Too soon, the sunflowers will finish their season and wither. The snow will bury them, and we will forget about them until another August comes. When the flowers bloom again, I'll be 1 year older, another year closer to finishing my season on the stage of life. Someday, like the sunflowers, snow will cover my resting place. Will my days of splendor under the sun be remembered? My name will not appear in any halls of fame. Though I've achieved moments of success, I never made an all-star team. My writings never won any awards or contests. No mountain routes bear my name. My run with Banjo Man and Company earned very limited fame, and none of my original songs aired on the radio, let alone the hit parade. However, my life could have been worse. I've enjoyed the game. Smiling, I look back with few regrets. As a Renaissance man, I explored my interests and had bunches of fun. My path was enriched by crossing many others' paths. I hope I touched some people's lives for good along the way. On occasion, I meet people who ask if I'm still playing the banjo, and sometimes individuals remember my influence on them as a scout leader or a student board bishop. After all, if every player on every team in the league made the all-star team, where would be the meaning of an all-star? All players on the team can enjoy the season games, even when warming the bench like I did. Just thinking, if I had devoted enough time and effort to becoming an Olympic gold medal winner, how would I have had time to plunk the banjo, create an oil painting, or write about sunflowers? As is fitting, most of my time and effort went toward earning a living so I could support my family. I failed to turn my music hobby into a career, but falling back on engineering and project management proved rewarding. I'm not one for wishing I could do it over again, though I'd probably do it all the same way. One world premiere movie sufficed. I've earned an adequate supply of fond memories. Yet I won't let fear of not being good enough stifle my exploration of more interests. Because I've learned you don't have to be an all-star to enjoy the game of life. And that's the title of my memoir. You don't have to be an all-star to enjoy the game of life.
Thank you, David, for the sunflowers. Thank you, Marianne and Emily. Fantastic readings. I am so excited to delve into those books and get every word. And thank you, Woody, and thank you, Joseph. Thank you all for being here. Tonight I'm reading one of my prose poem memoirs about my Mitch. It's titled Quietist. When my sweetheart was dying, the house felt quieter than I ever imagined it. No hammer, no crowbar, no boombox music, no drywall hawks and knives clatter, no ladders, no scaffold clanking into place. My sweetheart lay dying in bed, in the hospital bed, with the alternating pocket air cushion action, the shush, floop, shush under the soft sheets, the layers of blankets. My sweetheart stopped working on our old house after 32 years of demolition, renovation, remodeling, adding on. My sweetheart stopped working after everything was done, and he lay down at last in our beautiful bedroom he built with room enough for a hospital bed to fit beside our new queen bed we slept in together for only a year. Room enough for a portable bedside commode, room for a rolling bedside cart for his meds and water and oxygen equipment, the oxygen machine taking up more space around the corner in the parlor that was once our bedroom. In our bedroom, so quiet, the click whoosh of the oxygen machine seemed loud. It had the sound of the air cushion mattress, but louder than my sweetheart's voice when he remembered one urgent thing he hadn't done. Star, you've got to sell the drywall tools. And so in the quiet house we had built together, I called his drywall supplier and asked who might be interested. The next day, a crew of Hispanic drywallers arrived, wanting everything and wanting to call their friends to come look. Their friends who called more friends. I was frantic with naming and pricing and accepting cash, and the drywall tools were going out the gate, and as I went to check on my sweetheart, I could see that he was anxious and agitated. He said, "Star, you've got to get them out of here. I'm dying here." And I went out and said, "You have to leave. My husband is dying. Go, please." And they did. My sweetheart did not tell me to send away the man who was landscaping our yard after the construction of our addition, because my sweetheart said he liked the sound of the skid steer, the plowing and scraping. He said it was music to his ears because he wasn't doing that kind of heavy work anymore. He said, "I'm glad it's not me out there." But I was unhappy with the landscaping company taking too long and not using quality materials and not doing quality work, and so I fired them. And the workers left, and it was the quietest time we had ever experienced in our life together. I stopped all visits from friends because my sweetheart was exhausted. He was weak. He was depleted. He hadn't eaten for 2 days, only 2 sips of water, and then he fell into an ever-deepening sleep. I sat at his side and I wandered through the house, and I came back to check on him, and I took care of the dog and the cats, and I came back to watch as he slept. As he slept, he grew quieter in his breathing, not the heavy, rasping, dying breaths of others I sat with. As he quieted, he became beautiful. His skin became clear and pale and free of wrinkles, as if he were becoming younger. The quiet absorbed him, and in the peace and slowness of our time together with his dying, he began that transition out of this plane of trouble and care into a place of quiet and softness and ease. Then his breathing stopped. The quiet was beyond imagining. It was the quietest time in my life. It was good. It was sweet. The quietest. There will never be another quiet quite like that.
The thickness of the 2 paper plates was insufficient to support the weight of the mashed potatoes, gravy, and a slab of turkey breast, causing the dinnerware to sag. Cool orange jello with shredded carrots set into the salad, melted into the hot turkey gravy. I took a napkin, a knife, and a fork from the table and stuck them in my shirt pocket. Wrapping my hands firmly around the Thanksgiving feast, I shuffled my way to my grandparents' living room. Younger cousins knelt on the floor with their meals carefully placed on kitchen chairs that had been turned to serve as tables. At 9, I was one of the older male grandchildren, only my brother was older than I. As such, we had earned the privilege of joining my father and uncles in the living room, a rite of passage of sorts, almost as if we were accepted into an exclusive fraternity. The men filled the sofa, the armchairs, and any other available soft seat. My brother took the swivel piano stool, an odd bit of seating since Grandma didn't have a piano, and I sat on a metal folding chair, balancing my precariously loaded plate on my lap and clinging to the edge of the male circle. I leaned in, intent on what Daddy and my uncles were saying between bites of stuffing and potatoes. Daddy's brothers, Woody and Duke, and my aunt's husbands, Elvoyd, Merle, Keith, Jim, and Bernard, were in deep discussion about some get-rich-quick scheme that Uncle Jim championed, the details of which eluded me like the pieces of a puzzle I've not yet learned to assemble. "I'm telling you, men, this thing will pay for itself in 6 months," Uncle Jim said, waving his fork in the air. The men appeared unimpressed. Uncle Elvoyd kept the city park immaculate. Uncle Keith could sell anything except a bad idea. And Uncle Duke, like Daddy, could repair anything. Even Jim, for all his talk, seemed more cautious than his elaborate pitch suggested, especially where family was concerned. Mother's voice carried from the dining room, shifting my focus to where she and my aunts sat at the table, spooning food into the mouths of babies and toddlers in high chairs. Their conversation centered around their children, illnesses they'd had, vaccinations they'd received, and how the older ones were doing in school. The older female cousins congregated in the front entryway, forming their own clique and giggling over something unknown. I didn't think any of them had boyfriends, but I could have been wrong. Grandma fussed in the kitchen with the desserts, measuring with her knife to make sure that each piece of cake was of equal size. Grandpa made the rounds, checking that each grandchild had plenty of food on their plate and taking a minute to talk to each one. Unlike the elders of generations past who ate before the children, Grandpa held to the belief that children came first. So he and Grandma waited until everyone else had finished eating, especially the grandchildren, before taking their meals. A print of Da Vinci's painting of The Last Supper hung above the mantel, suspended from a wire, giving it a forward tilt. The dark oval wooden frame gave the picture an aged look as if it had been in the original convent in Italy. From the center of the image, Jesus' face looked across the meal he shared with his disciples into the living room, as if blessing our feast. It reminded me of the Sunday school lessons Grandma taught in the red brick church just up the road. The fire in the fireplace had burned out long ago and was no longer needed as the crush of people crowded into my grandparents' small home raised the temperature beyond comfort. Grandpa opened the door but closed it again when snowflakes filtered into the dining room. I breathed in the cool air, wafting through the archway, a brief reprieve from the crowded heat. The men's conversations lagged as they finished their meal. Uncle Jim's sales pitch dwindling in light of their apparent apathy. Daddy stood and gathered the used paper plates, carrying them to the trash bin, before returning to open a new topic of discussion, the operation of some new piece of farm equipment. All the uncles eagerly joined in, except for Bernard, who left in search of his wife, Aunt Maxine. Grandpa served chocolate cake and homemade ice cream, first to the grandchildren and then to the adults. Grandma emerged from the kitchen at last, leaning against the door, briefly taking a small helping of the turkey, stuffing, and potatoes. She sat at the table, her eyes sweeping over her family, and despite the smile that crept across her face, she brushed away a small tear. For an instant, a hush fell over the house. Even the babes in arms quieted until Grandma took her first bite. I didn't know it then, but holding that sagging plate warm in my lap, held more than food. It held the last of a tradition that I thought would last forever. In the months that followed, the snow melted, and Aunt Maxine and Uncle Bernard moved into my grandparents' home, bringing new rhythms to the house as they prepared for their first child. After receiving a mission call, Grandma folded her apron, tucking it into the kitchen drawer, and Grandpa zipped his coat, preparing to serve the people of the Fort Berthold Reservation in North Dakota, a desire that Grandpa had since his first church mission to Montana as a young man. They would be home in 6 months, they assured the family, just in time for life to settle back into routine before the annual feast. At least, that was the hope. But time, like orange jello melting into gravy, doesn't hold its shape for long. By Thanksgiving, Grandma was too weak from cancer to endure the rigors of such a gathering. The kitchen stayed quiet that year, her apron still folded in the drawer, the cake pan untouched. Family members were only able to visit in small groups, and even those visits had to be kept short and quiet. By the next Thanksgiving, we gathered not around a table, but around a memory of our courageous wife, mother, and grandmother who had gone too soon. Now each Thanksgiving I find myself reaching for that memory of when I was 9, the weight of that last full plate warm in my lap, with chocolate cake and homemade ice cream, even the melted Jell-O salad, and the way Grandma fussed to make sure everything was as it should be.
All right, our next 3 readers are Jan, Ronald, and Katie.
Hello. I have 2 short pieces I want to read tonight. The first one is a little Valentine story. And the second one is a poem I call The Anti-Valentine. So the title of the story, Valentine story, is And Then He Kissed Me. It was Valentine's Day, and I found myself barreling down the interstate to a previously arranged lunch date. I was sporting $150 worth of new clothes, new top, new necklace, new scarf, new boots. I didn't spring for the new underwear. That felt like it would be overkill. I had taken extra care in doing my makeup and hair that morning. My son-in-law gave me a thumbs up as I left the house, but I wasn't prepared for how nervous I was. What am I doing? How did this come to this? Every exit I came upon, I was tempted to veer off the road and turn around. I was too old for this. At one point, going 75 miles an hour, I had an actual panic attack. This was not boding well. I needed to get a grip on myself. I told myself over and over again that I'm a strong woman and I can get through this. I've got through tougher things before, like cancer for Pete's sake, and I should just relax and try to enjoy this. After all, I wanted this to happen. For 14 months, I had wanted this to happen. What was my problem? We had been texting for 14 months. I felt like I knew him fairly well over the course of these exchanges. In fact, I knew him from 48 years before. We had gone to prom together in high school. I knew his family well. His father had served as kind of a surrogate father for me one year, while my father was stationed overseas. His parents knew my parents, and his grandparents knew my grandparents, and vice versa. But the thoughts running through my head were, what if he finds my looks repulsive? What if I find his looks repulsive? What if we have nothing to talk about? What if it's all one big disappointment? What if? I was driving myself crazy. We'd been talking about meeting for over a year, but one or the other, one of us always chickened out. Then on a whim, I threw out a proposition for lunch near his work location, just 1 hour south of where I live, and he accepted. Before I knew it, I had taken the day off from work and found myself wheeling down the highway to this unknown destiny. What on earth was I thinking? When I realized the date we had picked to meet was Valentine's Day, I asked him if this would be weird for him. He replied that it would be perfect. Oh Lord, what did that mean? I didn't sleep much the night before. I kept tossing and turning, trying to create scenarios for when we would actually meet. How would it play out? Would I be able to keep the conversation light and airy, yet interesting? What would we discuss? We can't just talk about our date 48 years earlier. Some of the details have been lost even between the two of us. What if it's awkward? I awoke with a sick feeling in my gut. I checked my phone. Maybe he texted to cancel. No, he had not. Maybe I should text to cancel. But I did not. I actually left my house later than anticipated, which caused extra stress. That would put me at the restaurant destination right on time, no time to spare. I had wanted to sit in the car and chill for a minute or two before going inside. Yikes, what a mess I got myself into. I had Googled the directions to the restaurant, but good old Google didn't count for construction. After the highway exit, there was no way to get to the restaurant from the way I was going. I panicked, had to turn around and approach from a different direction. This was eating up too much time. I needed to be calm, not extra nervous. I finally got there and parked, trying to decide whether to sit in the car and watch him arrive or to go on in. I decided the advantage would be to be already inside, waiting for him. Was there enough time? What if he was already in there? I rushed inside. No one was there waiting, so I tried to calm myself down. I looked at my phone. I had 1 minute to spare, and no texts from him canceling. Ooh, I told myself to relax and just smile. He arrived 2 minutes later. I was able to recognize him, and he also recognized me. He had a huge smile on his face, and then he kissed me. So this is my anti-Valentine. Your selfish ways leave a trail of debris. For those in your presence eternally. Narcissism is the name of your game. Everyone else is wrong. You're not to blame. For you are solipsistic, always right. The world revolves around you to your delight. Your dagger of misogyny leaves countless scars. Your arrogance outshines the moon and stars. Sitting on your throne, drumming your breast, ensures to yourself you are better than the rest. Puffing up your ego, taking credit, undue. How wonderful it must be to be you. I hope this letter finds you lonely and lost. I hope you suffer for all the pain you caused. I hope you have someone who breaks your heart. I hope you ache when you have to restart. I hope you take a long time to mend. I hope to never see you again.
Hi.
Hey, Ron.
It's been about getting down. I couldn't see my yacht that was there all along. So you say why? You come and step down. Well, tell the way home. Well, I could have ridden. Since KGB, some yacht is hidden. So I feel in the bed and asked, how come? I missed my yacht because of being down. But we went to Helicon, 22 years now. I volunteered at Helicon. It's brought me much joy. But we went to my Valentine, my think about us, and till death do us part. That just won't do for my longing heart. For this life, when it lasts so long, it's not long enough for life to run. We have a good thing, you and me, and want to last for eternity. I love you so, I'm glad you're mine. You'll always be the Valentine.
Hello, my name is Katie Robinson. The first one I have is called Joy, and it was inspired by my mother. What I want is there, through, past, and within the dark, earn the stream from the depths, glory, righteousness, and joy. And this will disappoint my friend Marcus, but this one is not memorized. It's a little long, but we have spring weather, and I'm going to be gone, I think the next event, so this one is titled Purim, Easter, Passover, and to my knowledge, I haven't read it, so if I have, sorry about that. I saw in the night the world we live in today. There was no time greater than this. The present is always dissolving into a sea of stars. A story, a unique place, a defining journey. Hadassah, Ishtar, Esther, low humble high, changed robes and hair, queen. Occupied country, Sanhedrin, Marduk, Mordecai. Among these of the breastplate, Ahasuerus, Xerxes, first Xerxes. Husband, ruler, king. Agagite, Omenes, Haman, manipulated full picture. Inks were cool, or inks not cool, these were men. A few circles of the sun and stars God put there. View of the world, a world view. Take on what he considers, be faithful in receiving a change of heart. She became him a name for someone who teaches him the sensitive dependence. Benjamite, wolf, and Persian lion, a double anomaly. Time removed shyness. They were drawn more than completeness. Mid-yellow light and warmth. Incidents insider. Haman, his crafts on the kingdom. Israel, Jews, bow to me. Mordecai, father figure, refuses. Haman's hands on him who sits on the throne. Xerxes, balanced as scales. Note the imagery of suggested war. Heaven would be a guard. Pale sky unique, Saturday of the Holy Fathers. A unique address to any person. Mordecai invokes, be faithful in receiving answers that can't be. Nothing ever happens without adding a curse to a blessing. If we are silent, relief and deliverance for the Jews may arise from another place, even if our house may pass away. Perhaps this is the moment, such a time, why, for which you were created. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. A way out of no way. Catabasis, a unique place of contemplation. If my destiny is greater than my happiness, so let it be. My destiny is greater than my happiness. Because she was her, the queen embraced the wolf. I am on my way to the next final step until my final breath. Harmony varies to follow rises and falls. Heightened emotion, an unsummoned ascension before the throne, the precipice separating or binding together the fate of Israel for all Jews, annihilation or exaltation. Concentrate on the opposite. The scene, throne, Xerxes and Haman, toil, misery, justice. Snake in the grass, hot sun, incense, stone, winged lions, beast and bird. Posed like eagles, impatient for the sky. Below Esther, steps were rediscovered. Unsummoned ascension, brave honor, there is no final language with ongoing wonder recompensed. Focused presence, eyes, gaze, surrender, deliverance. Beauty, intelligence, and compassion for people. Robed and otherwise adorned, crowned with a sapphire diadem of speechless stars white shining for all. Love your fate, all things animate. Don't have to force it, just have to be. I was born for this, egoless, born for this. Death eclipse, full eclipse, there will never be anything more than this. Perhaps this is the moment for such a time as this. Time is a timeless time for which you were created. Gravity defied, silence will not fall sound. It will not fall from my eyes, this final step, current as balanced as scales. Destruction or salvation, regal spine, firm gaze. Stride with purpose, Esther surrenders, delivers herself. Perihelion, earth at which it is closest to the sun, unique for a queen, to address a king before the throne like this, born for this. It is the most important liminal crossroads. A sight to behold, it will not fall from my eyes. Separating or binding together precipice. No past, no future, just righteous presence. Centered prophetess, her eyes shone, she could see the future. Something was life. Everything vibrates, mirror, a portal, driving a path. Present, faith endures trials. Are we still each other or on different sides? Culmination, reckoning. Light is present throughout all of this. Born for this, ready for this. An army, your army, our army. I-beams meet, same, our eyes, us. Separation is not empty, heal me through a door. A shadow is lifting, revelation. They are wise and righteous, being semi-divine, a new sun. Her hand on him who sits on the throne, we are still each other. She created a change of heart immersed in his world, a duality fulfilling similarities. Wolfless queen, Persian king. Became a hand, became a wolf, deliverance. Triumph, victory, peace. The Jews are safe inside. Translators and prophets keeping and recounting history and stories. Hope and harmony, friendship and comfort. A model for centuries. Her descent delivered her people like Moses. You can call it the effect of leading us out of Egypt. Her wife, his wife, recounting the sacrifice. It has been coming to you with gratitude for much, to the theme of Iman. Sing on.
All right, we have two more open mic readers, unless anyone else wants to sign up. They are going to be Gail and Tim.
All right. Okay, I have two Valentines to add to the other Valentine. Valentine. I love you like the hummingbird loves the sugar water, inside the red plastic flower, hanging from the eave, ceaselessly, ravenously, fiercely, with his spear of French kiss, with his drum of Mesoamerican hot blood, sometimes with a vengeance. Cheeky little Aztec, just can't get enough. Zigzags around the empire, then right back for more. Crazy for it, sweetie, swilling like there's no tomorrow. Valentine. No wine, no chocolate, no frivolous hearts. I give you the unwieldy sack of black beans, a bean for every day of us, a scoop for the pot, the hot hash of onion and garlic, the lavish chipotle, the water, the slow softening, the shimmering, the steamy effervescence, the alchemy, the essence. I give you a bottomless bowl of them.
It looks like we got two more. Lucky us. Braden and Kate. Thank you guys.
I'm here, hello. I'm here representing the holiday Valentine's Day again, I guess. It's on the mind for many of us. So I'm thinking of my exes. Conveniently, I have a poem for 2 of them. This song is called Old Hoodies. This is for Carlos. In the orbiting darkness on Calle Asteroides, you will find him in his attic. Climb the ladder, see him stretched out in bed. Black Mamba tee ending just above his hip bones. He tells me he died at age 27. Cuts new life into old hoodies. Eats Pop-Tarts by the TV glow. Sugar crystals caught in the crevice of his big grin. I lick eagerly, wantingly. I wanted to love you with a love so big it'd keep you alive. So big it casts out all the loitering lobos still nibbling on scraps under the table. Babe, don't believe what the ghosts are telling you. Their future is dead, fix. Yours, a moon, held by sunrise and sunset skies. Over and over again, bright blue skies too. And this is a song for, not a song, it's a poem, for my ex-wife. A couple now come to the altar. For Anna. I spent a week in a forest like the one where we met, beneath the fragile ponderosas, a graveyard of branches fallen, now pitchwood sweating sap, burnt to butterscotch-scented flames coloring the treetops red. If you were sitting beside me, we might remind each other of those midnight escapes, watching movies in my white car neath the white light. That car took us everywhere, didn't it? Sometimes we'd sneak into the trees, play guitar, and sing to the pines. As I pined for you and you pined for me. That forest seemed endless, insatiable, opening its dry jaws on desert's edge, always to listen to the boomeranged hush of the passing crow. I spent a week in a forest like the one where we met. That forest took us everywhere, didn't it? To the dips and highs of love, of commitment, of letting go. Now I'm back by providence or propulsion to these forests again, to the ground draped in pine needles like a spilled matchbox. I see you in the trees at night, hear your singing on the wind. When will this forest let us go? Or do I have to do the going? Dry my brain like this creek bed. Or maybe atoms of you and atoms of me are still sneaking in the starlight, and that's how we'll be eternal. Not by covenant or creed, but by this altar of forever forests. You saying, I love you, every part of you, and me saying, thank you, thank you. Over and over and over and over till the trees that knew us then die and fall, recede. And we, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, you and I in this tall tree, grow and see eternal dusks, trunk by trunk, to the last syllable of recorded time, endless. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, I should preface this by saying I'm relatively new to writing poetry, so I make no promises. I'm going to start with just kind of a prose paragraph that I have. I guess I should kind of explain the context, or it won't really make sense. It's a box with a bunch of letters in it. So. The shiny surface is a mirror, reflecting the world around it in twisted and distorted shapes. Red face, unblemished, like the first slice through a perfectly ripe grapefruit. A thick, silky ribbon hangs from the front, enclosing the words of wisdom in its flesh. The sides drop off abruptly, forming sharp edges in their wake. A soft thud captures the sound of the lid closing, lip overlaying, magnets locking into place. The belly is full of hopes, prayers, and life. An uneven stack of sheets sliding, overlapping, waiting. Letters shaped by a careful hand in swooping script, smooth lips and softened edges, or the angular and masculine scroll. From the simplest note card to the grand soliloquy, each is at home. a chorus of voices repeating that I am known and loved. This is not a box. No, it's not a box. It is the love story of my life. And then, sorry, I have to go back and forth. Okay, so everyone, well, pretty much everyone knows the Robert Frost poem about the roads. So I kind of put myself in that position. I was like, what if I was standing at these roads? What would I do? It's called an ode. Time after time, I will undoubtedly think of the radiant road not taken. Two paths diverged in yellow wood, and alas, I could not take them both. But be it beyond me to see with certainty the summer or winter ahead. I pause there and sit and stare, unable to choose one from the other. It is neither a choice, I ask the woods, knowing no voice will reply, because it seems to me that there will always be many mountains to climb. I don't have all the necessary time, there's so many voices in my head. So sit with me and wait and see what lies in uncertain possibility. But I was wrong, surely the voice did reply, because suddenly echoing at me, is knowledge displayed in countless ways, the triumphant truth, it seems. The possibilities are always endless and certainties few and far between. Simply start walking, or you will never see the wondrous risk you're welcoming, to live and to love and to find yourself on whatever road you're taking.
All right, thank you everyone, feature readers, open mic readers. It was a wonderful event as usual. Please come to our next event on the 26th, where the Union of Table Scraps will be doing a reading. It's a wonderful writers group from here in the Valley, so don't miss it. Please come. But if you could also take one chair with you and put it away, that would be super helpful. But if not, no worries. That's what I'm here for.
Thank you, Woody.
Thanks, Woody.